Thank you all for coming today for this interesting talk about automating creativity, how artificial intelligence can change creative processes. My name is Stephanie, and I'd like to guide you through this interesting talk. So at first, I have to say this talk is in English. So if you need some German translation headsets, you will find it. I think it's over there in this corner. And don't forget to evaluate this talk afterwards. Here are somewhere QR codes you can scan. And if you like to quote something from the speakers, just use the hashtag MCB17 for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or whatever. So today we are here to talk about automation in creative processes and how can artificial intelligence change these creativity processes. So is it possible that creativity can be done automatically, and what are the opportunities about this automation, and how can new tools and instruments are integrated in these processes? That's why we have some awesome speakers today. Please welcome on stage Stefan Pfeiffer, Christoph Pleitgen, Samim Winiger, and Luba Elliott.
Okay.
When we think about robots or computers taking over the world, or at least our jobs, we think about heavy work like lifting some heavy weights or delivering stuff, or maybe building cars or something like that. But then IBM Watson was born. This question-answering machine is famous for writing a cookbook, or for cutting a movie trailer, or at least for designing a dress. When you tweet about this dress, it changes its color. So today we have Stefan Pfeiffer here working in marketing for IBM in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and he will tell us more about IBM Watson. But at first, we can have a look at the trailer.
Hello everybody, a horror thriller. I hope you all feel a little bit frightened. A horror thriller about an artificial intelligence, Morgan. And what it makes even more complicated, this trailer has been created by another artificial intelligence, by IBM Watson. So what did 20th Century Fox do together with IBM Research? We talked together, and then we put 100 horror movies into IBM Watson. We segmented these horror movies in scenes. We analyzed video scenes, audio, and the whole inscenation of these 100 horror movies. We gave them attributes: frightening, lovely. And then, after Watson has learned all these capabilities based on these 100 movies, we asked Watson, look through this new movie, Morgan, and please suggest us what would be the best scenes of the movie to create in the trailer, to get as many people as possible in the cinemas. And what you've just seen is the result of that. So we cut down the typical creation, which is as 20, 30 days, to create a trailer into 24 hours, where Watson suggested these are the scenes you should use. And honestly, and to be frank and free, it was not all done by Watson. There was, of course, a creator involved at the end who has put everything together. But the selection of the most emotional scenes was done by an artificial intelligence. And that's one example how artificial intelligence in a creative space like movie making can augment human intelligence and can help human intelligence to do work much better, much faster in comparison to the past. One example, very frightening. And now I have a much more lovely example. I would ask Maike to come on stage. And please, a warm applause for Maike. Maike, welcome on stage. What a beautiful woman, what a beautiful dress. But what is behind it, Maike? Okay, we need a mic, guys. No hand mic? Okay, so I have to explain it. So what Maike is wearing is what we call a cognitive dress. It has been a project we've done in the US, and we've done again here in Berlin. So a Berlin creator has designed this dress. What Watson has done is first analyzing the colors of all the dresses which are on stage at all the shows, the big shows, and it then made suggestions for colors. But there's even more in it. What is the cognitive part of this dress, Michael?
Yeah, the cognitive part is that the dress or the LEDs can analyze the sentiment in tweets. We use the hashtag IBM, and yeah, that's about the Watson tone analyzer, and the colors changes and when the sentiment changes.
So, very fascinating example. Color changes if you tweet positively, negatively, lovely, etc., etc. Again, an example where Watson on the one side helped a creator here in creating really nice costumes. How should a costume look like? Which color should you use? And then sentiment analysis, tone analyzing, which is really showing the tone, your mood in your current situation, and the dress is changing. One other example where we try to add creativity to a profession in the more artificial space. Thank you very much, Maike, and a big round of applause for you for joining us here on stage. Okay. Yeah, and that's my introduction. 2 examples where IBM Watson helped creative people, perhaps, hopefully, and I'm waiting for your response and your judgment, enhance creativity. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. So maybe you can answer just one more question. So how far can or should AI go in these creative processes?
Well, I have a very clear opinion about that. I'm coming from journalism. I'm a former writer. And I want to have an intelligent assistant which helps me in my daily life. And as an example, gives me all the most important information I need for my daily work. And at the end, writing up the article, creating the movie, creating the dress, that at the end my creativity and my special human brain, which is combining all the information and perhaps, hopefully, writes up something creative, creates something creative.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's move on to Christoph. Christoph is a Senior Vice President, Sales Business Development at Watchit. And his project uses AI to accelerate the video creation process in newsrooms or media companies or even for brands. So he will tell us today something about his projects.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you, Stefan. I really enjoyed you describing it as an intelligent assistant. That's how we are increasingly talking about the Watchit platform as well, and I will move from one sort of horror to potentially another. I will not only attempt to tell you about Watchit, I'm also going to, in the next 5 to 10 minutes, do a very brief live demo. At the very least, it'll drive up my blood pressure. If it goes wrong, it'll give you something to tweet about. Let's have a look. Can we switch to... Here we go. So, very briefly, what is Watchit? Watchit is an Israeli startup. We have developed a cloud-based video production platform. In essence, what we do is we combine, in a fairly unique way, a cloud-based approach with a very rich library of editorial or journalistic content and stock and creative content. We offer very, very simple editing functionality and a completely automated but also highly customizable post-production facility. But the story of Watchit is really a story of how do we help to address some of the challenges which I suspect some of you may be dealing with on a daily basis. So number one, we're trying to help with a commercial challenge, and that is simply how do you make the production of video for the internet in short form as affordable as possible. We try to help with a creative challenge, which is to say, how do you look at that workflow, at that creative process from the moment when one of you says, hey, wouldn't it be great to do a story about the elections in France last night, for example, to when you have that finished work, how do you make that as easy, as intuitive, as straightforward, and as efficient as possible? And thirdly, we try to help with a scale challenge, which is to say, once you've mastered that, once you've, in a sense, democratized video production, how do you scale up? How do you own a video story across multiple platforms, multiple aspect ratios, potentially multiple brands and multiple languages? So that's where we make our stand. Maybe surprisingly for an Israeli startup, the story or the secret sauce of Watch It is really nuance. Nuance in the sense that we neither say it is all about automation, it is all about artificial intelligence, nor do we say it is most advantageous to continue as you have before, which is to say, utilize expensive technology, highly trained people, expensive ways of procuring content, which gives you all the creative potential in the world. Unfortunately, especially for the internet, it's simply too expensive and it doesn't scale particularly well. So that's the story that we tell. And let me give you two examples, one of artificial intelligence and one of automation. Both are figure prominently in the title here. They are, of course, slightly different. So let's have a quick look. Excuse me, just going to switch. So this is the Watch It platform. One way, and I'm not going to give you a full demo, but one way in which we try to help our customers is by dramatically shortcutting or accelerating the research process. So what I've done here, I found a story on the BBC about the floods in Canada, and I'm simply cutting and pasting the URL into our platform, and hopefully this is going to work. What now happens is a scraping, which is to say we extract all the information that's inherent in the story at the level of the metadata and at the level of the text itself, and now we algorithmically try to understand what the story is about. In order to do that, we do something called an entity extraction. So algorithmically, we try to extract entities such as people, places, events, the relationships between them, and based on that, we go into a database of content and we extract content which we feel may be suitable to help tell that story as a video. And that's important, may be suitable. We are not saying we are doing the job for you, we're simply helping in suggesting content. And if you have a look at this, you have video, you have imagery of the flood, you have infographics which we deliver, such as maps, for example, of the entities of the places mentioned, a snapshot of the website, and we even deliver some tweets to you if you wanted to enhance your story that way. I'm going to leave it there. If you're interested to find out more about this, please come find me. But just a quick example of how artificial intelligence could help to support creative processes. Let's talk about automation really briefly. Here you see automation in the sense of using automation to transform a story in an aspect ratio, or a square story, into a 16:9. Now, what's intelligent about that? Where does automation make sense? It makes sense when you're reformatting a map. It makes sense when you are resizing text boxes. Doesn't make sense when it comes to actually selecting what part of the image do you want to show. I'll give you a second example. This is translating. So if you want to tell a story across multiple languages, which a lot of our customers do, rather than building a second video, you simply add the text to the original master. What that means is for your derivative story, you no longer necessarily need to employ a video editor. You could use a gifted translator. And the third is to say, if you want to make absolutely sure that you stay on brand message, why not work with certain templates to ensure that from a design perspective, your fonts, your colors, your logos, your design guidelines are absolutely implemented each and every time. That's it from me. I would suggest that if we have time for discussion, we talk about where all of this is going to go. Thank you so much, and I look forward to a good discussion.
Yeah, so thank you, Christoph. Maybe you can answer one question too. So what are the opportunities of this automation process? How can we integrate this tool in our daily workflow?
Well, as a media company, it is, in a sense, both simple and complex, because we're helping with a very specific challenge, and implementation is very easy. It is a cloud-based concept. For as long as you've got a semi-performant internet connection for as long as you've got a browser, for as long as you've got a computer, you can use this. Integration is very simple, but it addresses part of the challenge. There are other challenges, such as understanding audiovisual storytelling on the internet. There may be budgetary challenges, there may be technical challenges. So we can help, and I believe we do, but in terms of addressing this from a holistic perspective, we are helping with a very specific aspect of it.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to Samim. He's a creative producer, designer and engineer working at the intersection of human-computer interaction, machine learning and creativity. So you are the co-founder of Creative AI, and yes, you will tell us something about your actual work.
Thank you so much. So I'm Samim. I'm a designer that many years ago decided to plunge into machine learning, and it's human-computer interaction that I'm really fascinated by, and telling stories with this. And today I got invited to this conference, and I wanted to tell you about the intersection of creativity and AI. And there's so much happening there, of course. I mean, here's some examples just to get you started. AI assisting illustrators, automatic sketch cleanup, where you give it a rough sketch and it cleans it up for you. This is a 10x time improver, or architects getting assisted by AI systems to very rapidly build up structures, as you can see in this animation. You see the same for photography. This is a wonderful example. Angela Merkel should always look like this. Gaze correction, so as well in video games, obviously, just in the previous couple of months, we see generative video games where the entire universe of the game world is generated. As well in fashion, this is by nervous system, using different algorithmic approaches to generate fashion. And of course, on the upscale, you see this in industrial design now as well, shape optimization, where these things are more robust, but much more light in structure because they've been optimized by, in this case, a genetic algorithm. And finally, you see this at the intersection of art and architecture and so forth, where these algorithmic methods are being utilized to construct all kinds of things. As an example, in here, Michael Hansmeier doing room scale generative pillars. Now, the thing is, I was preparing this presentation, and then the title of the conference came back to hit me, because what the title here is automating creativity, how artificial intelligence changes the creative process. And this word automation is a loaded one. And so, I decided ultimately, I'm not working on automation myself, but why not just automate my talk then, so I can have a good time in you as well? And so this is what you'll see now. I decided to basically automate this entire presentation. So what is happening now is I took 1,900 speeches, that's 22 megabytes of text. You scrape it from the internet. You feed it into what is called a recurrent neural network, which is a certain type of neural network that is good on a recurring type of information like text. And finally, we feed this into a text-to-voice system. And John Cleese maybe said it best here: creativity is not a talent, it's a way of operating. So let me just let the AI do the presentation for me so I can relax a little bit. And here we go.
They are manufactured by governments to be a choice. So we should really get money at the summit of email. The reality is that there is a problem, and the fish have learned. They have been tracked in the world, but we do something to possibly change the next genes between a lot of books that we might never read. The sole knowledge is that all of the next molecule programs are information, and I am here to try to get an astronomer scanner. They have to move to the movement and the most exciting system of meaningful experience. For me, the concept is becoming the specific thing. You can see that the students get consumed in a way they get really helped in the technology that he died from. In the next few years of suffering, I wanted to know what I'm saying. Some people have a love life in the white stars. The real stage of the universe is learning about the world. We've been seeing the same thing, and they don't know what the same design is difficult to say to make a structural mosquito. We get agriculture to build the world of the mouse. And the galaxy is a sign of the depths of his environment. The second thing, the universe can postcard the people. We can connect to help control time. The most important systems of the radio teams in the name of the world is the social, physical, economic of how to carry the brain. Away the idea that they actually got an individual privacy that happens in fact that they are not gone. The average ability is that the brain can privately control the world.
Right, so the laughter you hear in this text, I remind you that this was trained on thousands and thousands of different speeches like I'm giving you right now. The laughter you heard there was every time in the transcript of this text, the audience would laugh. In the text, it was laughter, so that's also generated. And it's absolutely nonsensical, but nevertheless, you could call this computational comedy of some sort. Now, automating creativity is an alternative, because I find this term automation in conjunction with creativity rather divisive, to be honest, and the wrong frame. So is there an alternative? And yes, there is. Since the 1960s, we've been talking about augmenting creativity. And this graph here really makes the point quite well. Think about augmentation in terms of riding a horse. So NASA many years ago was thinking about automation, and they came up with this thing called the H metaphor, which literally means the horse metaphor. And when you're riding a horse, this is a collaborative process. The horse has agency. It does its thing. But you can exert control on the horse if you want to, or you can let go control. So it's a dynamic back and forth between you and the horse, which is a sentient being. And this is a very nice frame to think about creativity and AI or machine learning, much more so than automation for my own liking, at least. Now, why creativity and AI? This is a very important question we should all ask ourselves before we jump on simplistic answers like we can fire everybody here. And here's some reasons I personally find very interesting. Now, this is a quote by Albert Einstein: logic will get you from A to Z, imagination will get you everywhere. And one of the drives why we should apply machine learning and AI to creativity is that we can expand our ability for imagination. And this is really important because we are storytelling animals, and so this allows us to tell more magical stories at scale. And I think the world really needs that right now. The second reason, maybe even more interestingly to me, and this is a quote by John Seeley Brown, who was the chief scientist at Xerox PARC back in the 70s. I'm going to quote, start to consider how to move from user-centered design to user-centering design. Design that keeps us feeling located in the maelstrom. And if you have a Facebook account, which I hope you deleted tomorrow, you know this feeling that you are in this algorithmic stream and you feel completely swamped by it. And this is where user-centering design and applying machine learning to creativity really might help us refocus on essentials. And so I thank you very much. This last slide here is obviously Marguerite's famous thing. If you put it into an image recognition algorithm, it will actually tell you, yes, this is a pipe. So thank you so much.
So thank you, Samim. One question for you too. So can AI be taught to be creative without guidance? Is there a way that this creative process is really beautiful?
I've cried already reading algorithmic poetry. Literally cried, and that was an honest emotion that came up. Now, the caveat there obviously is that this system was, like in my example here, trained on human input data, and so it's arguably, it's to be argued if I cried of the kind of conglomerate information of everybody that wrote these things, or it was true, innovative creativity. That's up for grabs, I don't know. But I've cried before about algorithmic music and poetry, etc. So, yeah.
Okay, and what about images, some paintings or something like this?
Absolutely, but I mean, a brush is already an augmentation, isn't it? If you just paint with your hands or you paint with a brush, that's a massive difference. So I see it very much in that perspective, that an AI system in creative industries or in creativity in art, etc., is just a super brush.
Okay, so we're talking about art. That leads me to Luba, because she is an artist and a researcher exploring the role of artificial intelligence in the creative industries. So we are excited what you want to show us today.
Great. So I came into this field because I've always wanted to be an artist, but I never actually wanted to be the person who learns how to paint or how to engrave or who writes a lot to create poetry. I was just very fascinated about how the art world has these installations or sometimes bits of rubbish that you see on gallery floors that somehow get sold for millions at auctions. And I wanted to be part of that. So that's what drove me into the field. But what I do now is I organize an event series in London promoting various artists and thinkers who work in the field. And I also review art and also do some research on the topic. So I'm going to give you an overview of some of the artistic creations I've seen that I particularly like. Thankfully, none of the other three presenters have really looked at them. So we're going to start with Deep Dream. I'm sure many of you will have seen this. So this is based on a system developed by Google in San Francisco that enhances the features and images. So you can see you have these random animals and pagodas in a landscape that weren't in the original image. And this was used by an artist called Memo Acton, he's very curious at the topic and seeing how these tools are used to also kind of survey and so he used this system to change the view on the government headquarters in the US. And then there's another artist who changed the actual system from enhancing the features in an image to reducing them. So now you can see on one side you have Donald Trump, and on the other you have a figure that you probably can't recognize as Donald Trump, or at least I couldn't. And so this way that makes image detection and facial recognition more difficult. So perhaps you should go on his website if you do want to be hidden away from the surveillance. It's a good place to go. And there's some of his other work, how you can train a neural network on various classes of foods. So you have cheeses and food from a project by Constant Dullart, who wanted to look at the bias in data sets and see what Europe actually represents. And you see all these kind of food things. And then there are artists who train neural networks on other artworks. So this is somebody who looked at the data set of artworks from the Museum of Modern Art. And you can see the results from his neural network are quite interesting in a way. They could certainly pass as some abstract art if you're into that kind of thing. And there are artists who work with the video medium. There's somebody called Terence Broad who trained a variational autoencoder type of neural network on a film to reconstruct it frame by frame. So on one side you have what the film is actually like, and on the other it's the reconstruction. So you can see there are some similarities. It's the machine viewing this film through its eyes and then showing us what it remembers. It's quite cool. And then there are others who have used algorithms to automate or to generate the text that is created in films, such as Oscar Sharp and Ross Goodwin in Sunspring. And then there are also museums that have created competitions to see how you can bring more creatives into this topic. The winning prize was by Fabrica, an agency in Italy, which has developed an algorithm that compares current photojournalism to the most similar artwork you can find in the Tate's collection. So on the one side you have two eunuchs kind of painting makeup and getting ready, and on the other you have two ladies enjoying life and playing on a guitar. So apparently to a neural network those two can be very similar. And this is what I tried to do. So yeah, as I mentioned, I was very interested in the automation side, so I wanted to outsource all this all the creativity part and just claim that I could be the artist. So what I did was I did this short performance piece that I've done at galleries and conferences where I had two texts. One was written by a human, and the other one was written by a machine trained on a lot of George Bernard Shaw plays. And then I found volunteers who came from the audience, and I asked them, could you act out these texts works according to your interpretation of what a robot is or what a human is. And then the audience had to judge. So I was quite happy with that because there was minimal effort required on my side, but there was this performance that could happen. And yeah, these are kind of some of the images of people trying it out. And I can tell you that the audience didn't always get things right. But in my particular case, this was also because this depended so much not just on the text, but also on the performance, on the willingness to act, and then on the ideas they had about what actually makes a human and what makes a robot a robot. So that's that. And the other thing I do is more business-focused. So I'm also curious about what are startups doing, what are corporates doing to harness these tools to make the processes in the creative industries better. So this is a map I did with a colleague of mine called Peter Jegen from Flint Capital. And these are just some groups of applications that we feel the projects can be divided into. So one is search and discovery, so using recommendation systems to help people, for example, come up with new ideas using AI. So there's a search engine called Yasarian, where if you type in the term beauty, it will bring you results that will make you look at the concept in a different way. Then the second category could be called personalization. So it's about changing minor elements of a work, but keeping the idea intact. And Phrasee is an example. So that's a startup that lets you just tweak minor phrases in your emails to optimize your campaigns for all the individual users you do have. And then there's the interaction and the feedback side, where you have the humans and the machines kind of working together with the machine providing feedback. With Meji is an example that will enable you any object that will enable any object to become a musical instrument. And then finally, it's the augmentation/automation divide that we have here. So these are the startups that look at how you can incorporate AI into the essence of the actual work. So startups such as JukeTech that enable you to create music based on you kind of selecting what type music you like, what category, and the length. So that's me, and I very much look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Luba. Maybe you can explain what are the benefits for us, the viewers, when we have a look at this computer-generated art or creative stuff.
Yeah, so in terms of the benefits we get as viewers when we see these works, first of all, I think it makes us question as to kind of what we actually value in an artwork. Is it, the final result, kind of how beautiful the aesthetic of the image is, how it matches our expectation of what a particular type of art should be like? Or is it more about the process? So how the work was actually created and the thought and the stages that were put into it? Or is it about the idea and the concept that the artist or the creator has infused this work with?
Yeah, maybe this is a good question. Is it about the idea or the process, what the computer does? Yeah, so I think we have a few minutes left for questions from the audience. Don't hesitate to ask. I think we have a microphone somewhere. Do we have some questions? Okay, there's a question. We need a microphone over there.
Thank you. Hello. I have a question to Christoph Pleitgen from Broadchit. I want to talk about the scenario. So suppose I'm working for a government. My government has recently made a contract with, for example, big oil company, and all of a sudden there was like a certain incident. For example, something was flooded or something got like really polluted in a way. And now I want to kind of make sure that none of my stupid citizens going to kind of promote that whole story and don't find pictures of it. And I don't want my media to kind of publish any stories about that. So can I just go to you and ask you to alter the content which is shown to my journalists in my country so that they don't get any material to publish on that?
I have a sneaking suspicion that you know the answer to that. And the answer is, of course, not. We are a technology company. We work with reputable sources of news, so some of our news partners would include AFP, AP, Reuters, Bloomberg, Getty, the Press Association, and a few others. We help you to discover footage. We help you to discover the right content to tell your stories. We're absolutely not, it's simply not our business model. Why would it be? In the business of manipulating or falsifying information. So no, that's not our business, and we wouldn't be able to help you with that problem.
Do we have another question over there? In the second row.
Hey, another question for Christoph. I'm not sure how far your product actually goes in the creation process, but do you go in at all into the area of tone of voice? So basically, what I see the danger of your product could be that actually if everyone would be using your product, basically the product from every media company would be the same. So, and of course, what makes me go to one platform instead of another is the tone of voice that the platform has. So are you trying to incorporate that even into your product, that let's say I as an author or as an editor can actually give sort of an intention also into the whole process, so that then you pick specific clips or media to that, or how do you approach that in general?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I find I come from a news agency background, so I was with Reuters for many years, and I remember I was frequently asked, well, if everyone uses the same raw material, doesn't that mean we're all telling the same stories? And of course the answer is no. It's exactly what differentiates different media brands, different voices, is the tone of voice, like you said, and we absolutely recognize that. I would go one step further. I would say this is the essence of the story. The raw input, the text, the footage, the animated infographics, the whatever else you have, that's sort of an input to the storytelling, and we absolutely recognize that. So we feel, and that's in a sense the Watch It story, we feel we inject smart technology, and that could be automation, that could be artificial intelligence, into the creative process, but always in support of the storyteller, in support of the journalist, in support of the creative voice. It is not our intention to replace these people, because we feel that they hold the essence to an attractive story. From our perspective, certainly today, robot journalism has its place in certain specific use cases where news is highly structured and where it is essentially factual rather than, a way of telling a story, a way of getting bias across, of getting emotion across, of getting humor across. From our perspective, there isn't a need necessarily for more video on the internet. There is a need for creative voices to tell their stories, even if they don't have that deep video editing experience, and that's where we try to help.
So we talked earlier about just use computers or AI when it makes sense. So maybe, Stefan, you can explain this point of view.
I think there are, from my perspective, two use cases for artificial intelligence. One is really taking away routine work, research, collecting information for me, preparing information for me. So really assisting me in my daily work, whatever I do, if I'm a a video producer, journalist, or whatever I'm doing in creative work. And the second thing is, hopefully, developing patterns, ideas, mixtures, which I myself not able to come up with because I'm not able to analyze all this amount of raw data. We have this example of the cookbook Chef Watson or the Zuckerl-Werkstatt in Vienna, where we put in a lot of cooking receipts, and then the system makes proposals how a new menu could look like. So in this case, the system is inspiring the cook to try new stuff, and I think these are the two main aspects I do see. I would encourage everybody really play around with these artificial intelligence systems, Watson or other systems, it doesn't matter. They are available as APIs in the cloud. You can use face recognition, picture recognition, text to speech, speech to text. Really play a little bit around with it because it can inspire you for your daily work. Use it for routine tasks, as I've mentioned, and use it really to develop new ideas.
Samim, what do you think about this topic? When does it make sense to use AI for creativity?
In the industrial scenario in creative industries, of course, the automation story makes sense across the board. So you're already seeing the early beginnings of algorithmic ad agencies as an example, and the whole advertising market is moving more and more towards one where the human has absolutely no place to be. Because the CPIs, etc., are just that much higher if it's a real-time AB or ABC testing algorithm that does that on the fly. So there's a lot of room for creative industries to completely automate the entire field and fire hundreds of people, and that will happen. That is happening in real time. I think this is why in the speech I was keen on presenting an alternative narrative. It makes sense if you empower a person. I think one of you guys said that it is about empowering these voices out there to tell better stories. And this is a discussion we need to have on a societal level quite vividly, because progress really is something else than change. Change alone is not equals progress, and it's quite easy to mess this up quite radically. As anybody creative really knows, you don't compose a song just to have the artifact at the end of the day. You compose it as an act of engaging with reality, engaging with your inner being, etc. And in creativity itself, or in art production, this is quite important. So I think it's a fine line, and whenever I can, I try to encourage a broader discussion what this means, where we want to apply it, because change does not equals progress.
Okay, so let's ask the question of the question. Will computers take over our creative jobs, or are they just for inspiration? Yeah, nobody wants to answer this question, so maybe we can move on.
I'll put one tidbit there, and I think it came up already, which is the notion of non-human worthy work. There's a lot of work, grunt work they call it, where humans have absolutely no place doing it. It is soul-crushing work. We've all done it. And I think there it absolutely makes sense, firstly, to look at these areas. The more complex ones, we'll elaborate on them as we go down the history path. But the grunt work ones are very easy to make the case that absolutely we need a new collaborator, which is a machine.
Okay, something to add, maybe?
I'm happy to jump in as well. Longer term, I have absolutely no idea. Don't know. Maybe you guys know more. Don't know. I think in the short to mid-term, luckily, absolutely not. And I'm glad that, in a sense, the discussion, I'm just looking at the title here, has moved on. It's like, I think a few years ago, we all would have sat here on a panel and we would have talked about artificial intelligence, automation, is that the end of humanity and journalism as we know it? So now we're actually talking about how artificial intelligence changes creative processes, and to me, that's a much more interesting discussion to have. I think if you today are a publisher, are a media organization, are a storyteller, are a creative on the internet, chances are you will not get around utilizing some sort of combination of artificial intelligence, automation, and creativity. Certainly if you're in it for commercial purposes, certainly if you're in it to create at scale. And I think the more interesting question is, what's the right mix for you? And that answer is going to be very, very different depending on the people you're looking to reach out to, the country you're in, your competition and all of that. So actually finding that right balance on that spectrum between complete automation on the one end and total creativity and almost artisanal approach to content creation, or in general creativity, that I think is a much more interesting discussion to have.
I think so. Do we have one more question from the audience somewhere? Last chance. No question? One question in the middle.
Thank you. I was just wondering, I was seeing a prototype recently of a composing machine, music composing machine, completely driven by AI. And bound to a sensoric system, it would allow to listen to the music the way you feel or to cheer you up and etc. So my question is especially for the two video and film guys, are you using connected AI for the sound? Could it be for the automated talk that we saw from Samim, or from the music point of view? Thank you.
Well, we had a very interesting project with Alexa the Kid, perhaps one or the other knows him. And we did really compose with the help of Watson new songs for him. So, you know, yet example, there's another example where you can use artificial intelligence, use a composition of an artist, and work back to traditional other music, rock, techno, etc., and create new suggestions. How could a song look like? And that's again, where I say creativity uses this artificial intelligence, or better, augmented intelligence, to empower creativity and get new ideas how to make a painting, how to make a song, how to do a better video or better text. And that's why I say we need to play around with that to develop competency about artificial intelligence. There's a lot of people talking about it who have no clue. So play around with it in music or wherever you want to play around with it, get new ideas, and then we have a better judgment where it is going. But we should really have competency and really work with it in our daily job. And not everything will be fine. Not everything will be great and glorious. There will be bad examples, I promise you. But there will be a lot of other examples where we say it can help us and can empower creativity. And that's why I say if we don't play around with it, we'll never experience really the bad and the good sides of it.
Okay, another question over there.
Yeah, a question. Who does the artwork, the music, the video belong to? The machine, the company? Who is the owner at the end?
It's depending, of course, which system you are using. In our case, it belongs to Alexa the Kid, because it's a project with him, and the intellectual property is his ownership. But that's an example. IBM Watson is always, the property is always at the company or at the person using the system. It's never with IBM.
Do we have one last question? No? Okay. So our time is up. Thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure to have you here. And thank you all for listening. Please don't forget to evaluate this talk scanning this QR code over there. And the next talk on this stage is Step into Star Wars, the Future of Immersive Storytelling. Enjoy and goodbye. Thank you.